A new poll shows President Biden ahead of former President Trump in a 2024 matchup. The Reuters Ipsos survey has Trump trailing Biden by 5 percentage points. But the latest Real Clear Politics average has Trump slightly ahead of Biden, with 45% for Trump and 44% for Biden.
Biden's age, however, still remains an issue for voters, and according to Axios reporter Alex Thompson, it was said in a White House poll report that Biden, quote, reflected on his decision to seek the presidency. He told the story about the events in Charlottesville in 2017 as the reason for his campaign. A few minutes later, he told the story again, nearly word for word, and then declared that our democracy was at risk.
Speaking to ABC's Lindsay Davis, Democratic National Committee Chair Jamie Harrison said Joe Biden has been underestimated his entire career, and also if there will be a Democratic debate ahead of the 2024 election. Take a listen.
I've been going all across the country, Lindsay, and I can tell you that people are very excited about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And this is the thing with polls at this point in time. You know, Joe Biden's been underestimated his entire career. And the one thing we know is when you underestimate Joe Biden, he proves you wrong time and time again. As it relates to the primary, listen, we are following the tradition. Never have we had a debate during when we've had an incumbent president and on either side, Democrat or Republican. And so we're not starting in 2024 under my tenure as DNC chair.
I'm not sure I quite buy his claim there that voters are really excited for Biden. I think a lot of them are trying to maybe decide between the lesser of two evils, but all of the polling that we've seen so far suggests that the majority of voters don't want it to be another Trump-Biden matchup, and the majority of Democratic voters would rather see somebody else emerge from the nomination process. Now, I know as the DNC chair, Jamie Harrison is sort of required to say that to support the frontrunner, but it does strike me as maybe a little bit dishonest, as the DNC is not even willing to hold debates to allow some of those other candidates to challenge Biden truly.
We're still over a year out of the presidential election, so I think that a lot of the polling right now is not going to mean anything at all by October of next year. With that being said, I know Jamie Harrison right now, the Congressional Black Caucus is actually hosting its convention here in D.C., and Jamie Harrison has literally been at everything. I've spoken to him several times. It's very interesting to me that there is a consistent argument from people on the right about basically changing the rules as it relates to an incumbent president having debates. We don't have it on the Democratic side. They don't have it on the Republican side either. As you can recall, during the last election, President Trump had two challengers, three challengers, and they kind of died on the vine before it could even make it to an actual primary. And that was fought very hard for them to even be in the primary because the RNC basically saw no point in it. Right now, we're looking at single-digit people who aren't even, legitimate candidates to the extent that they've never held any political office, to the extent that we've got somebody in RFK Jr. who is known to push conspiracy theories, who is known to have had a long legacy of addiction that led to other questionable behavior. We also have a lady who basically is known for being the crystal lady more than anything else. These aren't even legitimate challengers. But again, the more important point here is that this is a question that has come up for Biden that did not come up for Trump when we watched this happen and people tried to challenge him. It's also one that runs ahistorical to how we've done things when we have an incumbent in office. So I don't think that anything is being done here that is different. Quite frankly, it is status quo for how sitting presidents have always been managed when it comes to running for re-election.
I think what's different here is that RFK Jr. is polling as high as 14% in some of these situations, Marianne Williamson hitting 9%. So I do think these are legitimate challengers, and I take issue with your questioning of whether or not they're legitimate because they haven't held political office before. Donald Trump had never held political office when he ran for president in 2015 or previously in the early 2000s. And I don't know what RFK Jr.'s history of addiction has to do with whether or not he's qualified to be president.
Well, his family does. So we've heard from several of his family members, from everyone with the Camelot dynasty name, everyone who is named Kennedy does not endorse RFK Jr., nor the legacy that it seems that he has moved away from when it comes to the Kennedy family. So I do think there is something to be said there. Again, this runs ahistorical to how elections have been run. If you're going to bring up age, you have to also bring up age with both candidates. They are 3 years apart. If they were within the same city and within the same school district, they largely would have been going to the same school at the same time. They're both seniors. years. If there's an argument there, then the argument should apply across the board. But trying to elevate people who, one, do not have the votes of the Democratic population. We know this. We know that in a primary, they would end up dying on the vine. We've seen time and time again, President Biden, and I agree with Jamie Harrison. President Biden has been underestimated time and time again. He was underestimated in his own Democratic primary, where black voters, the base of the Democratic Party, the tried and true Democratic voters, did not want to see anyone that was not Joe Biden. And that is the case now. RFK Jr. does not make a quake in the black community. You know who doesn't either? Marianne Williamson. We know that these people do not matter to the base of the Democratic Party. The majority of the people who they are pulling, and we know in terms of funding specifically for RFK Jr., are right-leaning. They are conservatives. They are people who lean in on conspiracy theory. They are not people who are voting in the Democratic primary anyway.
Well, you don't know that. I mean, and again, if your theory is true,
we know where their funding comes from. We absolutely
that's not what I'm saying. But I think if your theory is true that these would die on the vine, these primary challengers, why not put your theory to the test? Why not allow the opportunity for these people to prove themselves or disprove themselves? I don't think saying, well, he has a history of drug addiction and the other Kennedys don't like him because they're totally in bed with the Democratic establishment is a legitimate argument for saying.
First off, that wasn't my argument. I said that he had a history of drug addiction that led to other levels of criminality, up to and including his previous wife literally killing herself because of the abuses.
Whoa.
So
no,
I think there are things here that are problematic associated with this man and the choices that he's
what
made.
What you just said is so off base.
Up to and including ignoring the facts of the pandemic and spreading conspiracy theories around the efficacy of vaccines, spreading conspiracy theories around how young children develop autism, spreading all of these things, a lot to him not being fit for that office.
We need to go back for a second to what you said about you used his wife's suicide against him as evidence that he shouldn't be running for president. I've lost someone to suicide.
My brother committed suicide. I lost my own brother to suicide. I know suicide very personally.
Okay, and so you know very well that there is not one factor that contributes to someone's suicide.
We also know that he had a history of abuse with that woman. She was very vocal about that level of abuse.
You were not in that relationship, and you should know better than to speculate.
That's not speculation that he abused his wife.
No, you're speculating that he caused her suicide. You know very well that it is wrong to speculate.
I know that he abused his wife. We all know he abused his wife.
And yet you said that it was his drug addiction that led to her suicide. That is a wrong thing to say.
Abuse. His level of abuse.
You said it was his addiction.
His level of abuse. I said his level of abuse. I said his level of abuse, and his level of abuse has been.
We can go back and roll the tape after this.
Well documented.
But and again, that might be a reason that a voter might not choose to vote for him. It does not mean that he's not a legitimate candidate.
You hold your legitimacy in a way that I do not, and that has been proven. However, what I do know is that amongst Democratic voters, and that is the party he is running in, that is the base
he's polling at 14%.
He is not someone who can win in Ohio. He is not someone who can win in the majority of Democrats. He's not someone who can win in Michigan. He's not someone who's going to win Georgia.
You're speaking as a Democratic strategist, not as someone who wants a fair primary process.
I've seen the polling of those Democratic states, of those areas in which the road to the White House will run through these states based on the primary calendar. There is no way that he stands a snowball's chance in hell.
That's not even fair to you to say, because if he has 14% before even stepping on a debate stage,
that is based on national polling. It is not based on the primary states in which he has to win to make it.
My point is that he is fighting against the establishment. He has no institutional backing, and to be able to poll at 14% nationally without any of the benefits that Biden has as the incumbent president with the backing of the Democratic Party, I think speaks to the fact that voters want to hear what he has to say.
The Democratic Party is not the least bit worried about RFK Jr. and for legitimate reasons.
I think they are worried. Otherwise, they would have no problem with allowing him the ability to actually get involved in the primary process.
They're not worried in the same way that former President Trump is not worried about his Republican challengers and is not showing up to debates.
But instead of even acknowledging that he's a candidate who's polling quite well for somebody who literally came out of nowhere, you said that he's a conspiracy theorists that he is disqualified because of his history of addiction, because of his wife's suicide,
No, I said because of the acts that came out of his history of addiction.
other Kennedy family members don't like him. I mean, those are all, again, reasons for the voters to evaluate whether or not he's legitimate or
and
a real candidate.
In the early primary states, he is not someone who is polling well at all. You keep quoting a national poll. He has to make it through the early primary states. He's not making it in South Carolina. He's not making it in Georgia. Those are the facts.
But again, that's easy for you to say when he's been completely shut out from the process by the powers that be.
Because those voters do not support him. That's what that is.
You're
those
speaking for voters who haven't even had the opportunity to fully evaluate him because he's been completely shunned by the Democratic Party.
That they have already shut the door.
The Democratic Party has not even allowed him to present his case to the voters in the way other candidates traditionally would have.
The case that he's appealed to voters is one that brings in a camp that is not Democratic voters. Is one that brings in right-wing voters. He is not talking to a Democratic base. The base of the Democratic Party is younger. It is women. It is black voters. It is other minorities. His messaging is not even geared towards these individuals, nor their values, nor their belief systems, nor has he actually even been on the media circuit that focuses on these individuals. He hasn't. He is appealing to a very far-right group, and he's appealing to conspiracy theorists. He is not talking to the Democratic base. He's not talking to Democratic base voters, and he doesn't care about them.
But it's not a requirement for someone who's running.
Well, if you're going to try to win, you might want to talk to the base of voters it takes to win.
What I'm saying,
that is a requirement.
That's not what I'm saying. If you let me finish my point is that it's not a requirement that the only people they speak to are the base of the party. And in any primary, you also want to look at the electability of somebody in a general election. RFK does have potential electability in a general election when we look at that polling too. And for Biden at this point in the game to be already suffering a 1 percentage point deficit in that Real Clear Politics polling average, I think is a serious issue for them. And I think Democrats should be scared that Biden, despite the benefit of the incumbency and already defeating Trump once before, is already having that
Biden
deficit
is a lot more
polls.
concerned with developing strategies and focusing in on what will be assumedly his opponent, Donald Trump.
Yeah,
he's not worried about RFK Jr. His focus is on the right thing, as is the Democratic Party.
I certainly hope that his campaign this time around is done more than just from his basement, but we'll see what happens. All right, heated discussion. We're going to take a break and be back with more Rising after this.